What would you do if you found a desperate mother and her children hiding in the scorching heat, running from men who claim to own their future? Cole Maddox, a lone rancher weathered by loss and silence, never expected that one blazing summer day would force him to choose between his quiet life and doing what's right. When he whispered those four words, "Come here, all of you," he didn't just offer shelter. He ignited a battle that would test everything he believed about justice, family, and second chances. Stay with me until the end of this story and comment the city you're watching from so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The heat was the kind that didn't just touch skin. It invaded, claimed, conquered. It rose from the sun-baked earth in shimmering waves, distorting the horizon until the world itself seemed to ripple and bend under its weight. Across the empty plains of Montana Territory, where settlements were sparse and mercy even sparser, the summer of 1882 pressed down like a hand determined to crush whatever life remained beneath it. Cole Maddox had learned long ago not to fight the heat. You couldn't win against something so indifferent, so absolute. You could only endure it, move through it, let it wash over you like a river of fire, until evening came and brought its brief, inadequate relief. He rode his stallion, Ash, at an easy pace through the dusty main street of Redemption Falls. If you could call 3 buildings and a water pump a town. His hat sat low over his eyes, casting his weathered face in shadow, and his shirt clung to his back with sweat that had long since stopped evaporating. At 34, Cola carried the quiet weight of a man who'd seen enough to stop expecting surprises. His ranch, the Broken Creek, sat 5 miles northwest of this nothing place, and he came into town maybe twice a month for supplies he couldn't make or grow himself. Coffee, salt, nails, the occasional bottle of whiskey when the silence got too loud. He wasn't a man who needed much, and he'd built a life that reflected that philosophy, simple, solitary, sufficient. But on this particular day, as Ash's hooves kicked up small clouds of dust and the cicadas screamed their endless song in the cottonwoods, something felt different. Wrong, maybe. Or just off. Cole had spent enough years reading land, weather, and animals to trust his instincts, even when he couldn't name what they were telling him. He dismounted near the general store, looping Ash's reins loosely around the post. The horse immediately lowered his head into the shade, exhausted by the ride despite its leisurely pace. Cole ran a hand along the animal's neck, feeling the heat radiating from the dark coat. "Easy now," he murmured. "Get you water in a minute." The store's porch creaked under his boots as he stepped up, and he was about to push through the door when he heard it, a sound so faint he almost missed it beneath the buzz of flies and the distant bark of a dog. A child's cough. Small, weak, trying to be quiet. Cole stopped, hand on the doorframe, and listened. The sound came again, followed by a woman's whisper, urgent and soothing at once. His eyes tracked to the narrow gap between the general store and the abandoned land office next door. The space couldn't have been more than 4 feet wide, filled with shadow despite the merciless sun overhead. Most people wouldn't have given it a second glance, but Cole Maddox wasn't most people. He stepped off the porch and moved toward the gap with the same careful deliberation he'd use approaching a wounded animal, slow enough not to spook, purposeful enough to show he meant business. "Hello?" His voice was low, rough from disuse. "Someone there?" The silence that followed was too complete to be natural. Even the child's cough had stopped. Cole took another step, his eyes adjusting to the shade. And then he saw them. A woman pressed against the back wall, her arms wrapped around 2 children, a girl who couldn't have been more than 5, and a boy trying so hard to look brave that it broke something in Cole's chest. The woman's face was gaunt, sunburnt across the cheeks and nose, her lips cracked and bleeding in places. Her dress, once probably a decent calico print, was stained with dirt and sweat and dust so ground in it had become part of the fabric itself. But it was her eyes that stopped him cold. They were wide, alert, full of a desperate intelligence that weighed him in an instant, measuring threat, calculating escape routes, preparing for violence. She'd been running for a long time. "Please," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "Please, we're not causing trouble. We'll move on. Just give us a minute." The little girl whimpered, and the woman pulled her closer, one hand pressing against the child's forehead. Even from 6 feet away, Cole could see the child was burning with fever. "How long have you been here?" he asked, keeping his voice level. The woman's jaw tightened. "We're leaving, right now. Henry, help your sister up." The boy moved to obey, but when the woman tried to stand, her legs gave out. She caught herself against the wall with one hand, the other still clutching the feverish girl, and for a moment Cole thought she might pass out entirely. He moved forward instinctively, hands out. "Easy. Don't touch us." The woman's voice cracked like a whip, and she somehow found the strength to pull both children behind her, creating a human shield with her own body. "Don't you dare!" Cole stopped, raised his hand slowly, palms out. "I'm not going to hurt you." "That's what they all say." Her eyes blazed with something beyond exhaustion, a fury born from too many betrayals, too many lies dressed up as kindness. "I know." Cole kept his voice steady, gentle. "I know that's what they say. And I know you got no reason to believe a stranger. But your daughter's sick, ma'am. Real sick. And this heat." He glanced up at the merciless sky, then back to her. "This heat's going to kill all three of you if you stay out in it much longer. We'll manage." But even as she said it, the little girl moaned, and the woman's face crumpled for just a second before she forced it back into rigid determination. Cole studied them for a long moment. The boy, Henry, she'd called him, couldn't have been more than 8, but his eyes held the hard-earned wariness of someone much older. His clothes were too small, his arms thin but wiry. He stood slightly in front of his mother and sister now, fists clenched, ready to fight despite being outweighed by 150 pounds. The woman herself was young, probably not yet 30, though hardship had drawn lines around her mouth and eyes that added years. Her hair, dark brown and tangled, was pulled back in a braid that had mostly come undone. She wore no jewelry except a simple gold band on her left hand, and even that looked like it might slide off her thinned finger at any moment. "What's your name?" Cole asked. The woman's eyes narrowed. "What's it to you?" "Nothing, I suppose, but if I'm going to help you, seems like I should know what to call you." "We don't need your help." "Ma'am, with all due respect, I think we both know that's not true." A long silence stretched between them, broken only by the little girl's labored breathing and the endless drone of insects. Cole could see the woman calculating, weighing options, trying to determine if trust was a risk she could afford to take. Finally, in a voice that shook slightly, she said, "Eliza? Eliza Warren." "Cole Maddox." He lowered his hand slowly. "These your children?" "Yes." The word was fierce, protective. "Henry and May, they're mine. And you're running from someone." It wasn't a question, but Eliza answered anyway. "That's none of your concern." "Maybe not. But I got a ranch about 5 miles from here, got fresh water from a deep well, cool house with thick walls. Your daughter needs to get out of this heat, Mrs. Warren, needs fluids and rest and probably some willow bark tea for that fever." "Why?" Eliza's voice was sharp, suspicious. "Why would you help us?" Cole considered the question. Why would he? The smart thing would be to walk away, collect his supplies, ride back to the broken creek, and forget he ever saw this desperate woman and her children. Getting involved in other people's troubles was a sure way to inherit those troubles yourself. And Cole had spent the last 5 years deliberately building a life with no complications, no entanglements, no one to worry about but himself and his livestock. But standing there in that narrow alley, looking at a little girl who might not make it through another day in this heat, and a boy trying so hard to be a man, and a mother who would clearly die before she let anything happen to her children, Cole found he couldn't walk away. "Because it's right," he said simply. "And because I got the means to help, which makes it my responsibility." Eliza laughed, but there was no humor in it. "Responsibility, that's a pretty word." "It's the only word I got." Cole took a small step forward, slowly, like he was approaching a wild horse. "Look, you don't know me, and you got no reason to trust me. I understand that. But your daughter's in a bad way, and the longer we stand here arguing, the worse she's getting. So here's what I'm offering. You come back to my ranch, rest for a day or two, get some food in your bellies, some water in your systems, let the little one recover, and then, if you want to move on, I'll give you supplies and point you in whatever direction you need to go. No questions asked, no strings attached." There are always strings, Eliza said bitterly. Not with me. Cole met her eyes steadily. I give you my word. Your word. She shook her head. What's that worth? Everything I got. Cole's voice was quiet but firm. It's all any of us got in the end, really. Our word and what we do with it. Another long silence. May coughed again, a wet, rattling sound that made Eliza close her eyes briefly. When she opened them again, they were bright with unshed tears. If you're lying, she said, her voice breaking slightly. If you're playing us somehow, I'm not. How do I know that? Cole slowly reached into his vest pocket, moving deliberately so she could see every motion. He pulled out a worn leather wallet and removed a small photograph, holding it out to her. This was my wife, Sarah, and our daughter Emma. Emma would have been about your May's age now. Eliza took the photograph with trembling fingers. The image showed a pretty woman with kind eyes standing beside a young girl who beamed at the camera with gap-toothed joy. Would have been? Eliza asked softly. Fever took them both, winter of '77. Same week. Cole's voice remained steady, but something raw flickered across his face. I know what it's like to watch someone you love slip away while you stand there helpless. I won't let that happen to your daughter, if I can prevent it. Not when I got the means to help. Eliza stared at the photograph for a long moment, then carefully handed it back. She looked down at May, then at Henry, then back at Cole. One night, she said finally. We stay one night, and then we leave. That's your choice to make. And no questions about where we came from or where we're going. Already told you, no questions. Eliza nodded slowly, then tried once more to stand. This time, Cole didn't ask permission. He simply stepped forward and scooped May up into his arms. The little girl was frighteningly light, her skin burning against his chest even through his shirt. Hey now, he murmured to the child, who stirred weakly. You're going to be just fine. We're going to get you somewhere cool with lots of water. How's that sound? May's eyes fluttered open briefly. They were the same deep brown as her mother's, and she whispered something too quiet to hear before her head lolled against his shoulder. Henry, help your mother, Cole said. The boy immediately moved to Eliza's side, and together they emerged from the alley into the brutal sunlight. The street was empty. Most sensible people were inside during the worst heat of the day, but Cole felt exposed nonetheless, aware that they made quite a sight. A lone rancher carrying a sick child, accompanied by a desperate-looking woman and her young son. My horse is here, he said, guiding them toward where Ash waited. Mrs. Warren, you and May will ride. Henry, you can ride with me. It's not far. Eliza opened her mouth as if to protest, then simply nodded. She was conserving what little strength she had left. Cole lifted her into the saddle with one arm, then handed May up to her. The child settled against her mother's chest with a small sigh. Henry looked at Cole with those two old eyes, and Cole could see the question there. Can I really trust you? I know you got to look out for your family, Cole said quietly, for Henry's ears only. That's a good instinct. Keep it. But right now your mother and sister need help, and I'm offering it freely. No tricks. Henry studied him for another moment, then nodded once, sharp and decisive. Okay. Cole swung up behind Eliza, careful not to jostle May, and reached around to take the reins. Henry climbed up in front of him, sitting ramrod straight despite his exhaustion. Hold on, Cole said, and urged Ash into a gentle walk. They left Redemption Falls behind, heading northwest across the rolling prairie. The heat pressed down relentlessly, and more than once Cole felt Eliza sway in the saddle. He kept one arm loosely around her waist, steadying her without crowding, while Henry sat silent and watchful in front of him. The landscape stretched endlessly in all directions. Brown grass gone brittle from drought, occasional stands of cottonwood marking creek beds that ran low or dry this time of year, distant buttes rising like monuments to some forgotten purpose. It was beautiful in its own harsh way. This land that demanded everything and gave back only what you could wrest from it through sweat and stubbornness. After about 20 minutes, Henry spoke for the first time. Is it true what you said about your little girl? Yes? I'm sorry. Cole glanced down at the boy's dark hair, matted with sweat and dust. Thank you. Did it hurt her when she died? Henry. Eliza's voice held a warning. It's all right, Cole said. It's a fair question. He thought about how to answer honestly without frightening the boy more than he already was. The fever made her sleep a lot toward the end. The doctor gave us medicine to make sure she wasn't in pain, and when she passed, she was in her mother's arms, and we told her we loved her. So, no, I don't think it hurt. I think she just went to sleep. Henry nodded slowly, processing this. Then, May's gonna be okay, though, right? I'm gonna do everything I can to make sure of it. That's not the same as yes. No, Cole agreed. It's not, but it's the truth, and I figure you're old enough to handle truth. Another nod, and then silence, except for the steady rhythm of Ash's hooves and the whisper of wind through dry grass. The Broken Creek Ranch appeared gradually, first the line of cottonwoods marking the creek itself, then the weathered barn and outbuildings, and finally the house. It wasn't much to look at. A simple two-story structure built from local timber and stone, its boards gone gray from sun and wind, its roof patched in places with mismatched shingles. But the thick walls kept it cool, and the deep porch provided shelter from both rain and sun, and Cole had never needed it to be anything more than functional. He guided Ash to the front of the house and dismounted, then helped Henry down before reaching up for Eliza. She practically fell into his arms, and he caught her easily, holding her steady until she found her feet. "Can you walk?" "Yes." But her voice was weak, uncertain. "Henry, get the door for your mother." The boy ran ahead and pushed open the front door, revealing the dim, cool interior. Cole scooped May up again and led the way inside. The parlor was spare but clean, a worn sofa near the fireplace, a rocking chair, a few shelves holding books and trinkets. Everything was covered in a thin layer of dust that spoke of a house maintained for function rather than beauty, inhabited by someone who spent most of his time outdoors. "Upstairs," Cole said, heading for the narrow staircase. "There's a bedroom you can use." He climbed the stairs with May in his arms, Eliza and Henry following slowly behind. At the top, he turned right and pushed open the door to what had been Emma's room. He hadn't been in here since. The room was frozen in time. A small bed with a faded quilt, a dresser with a brush, and hand mirrors still sitting on top, a rag doll propped against the pillow. Dust motes danced in the shaft of sunlight that cut through the gap in the curtains, and for a moment Cole felt the weight of 5 years crash over him like a wave. "Mr. Maddox?" Eliza's voice, soft and uncertain. He shook himself, cleared his throat. "Sorry, I'll change the sheets. Give me a minute." He laid May carefully on the bed, then moved to the linen closet in the hallway. His hands remembered the routine even as his mind stayed carefully blank. Pull the old quilt off, replace it with fresh sheets, shake out a light blanket. Keep moving. Don't think too hard. When the bed was ready, he gently arranged May in the center, her small form barely making a dent in the mattress. Eliza sat beside her immediately, pressing a hand to her daughter's forehead, then her cheeks, her neck, checking the fever with a mother's practiced touch. "I'll get water," Cole said, "and I've got willow bark in the kitchen. We'll make tea to bring that fever down." "Thank you." Eliza didn't look up, all her attention focused on May. Cole headed back downstairs, Henry trailing behind him like a shadow. In the kitchen, a large room that took up most of the back of the house, Cole worked quickly, drawing fresh water from the pump at the sink, setting a kettle to boil on the stove, finding the jar of dried willow bark he kept for livestock ailments that worked just as well on humans. "You know how to cook, Henry?" he asked. The boy nodded. "Yes, sir." "Don't call me sir. Cole's fine." He pulled out a loaf of bread he'd bought in town 2 days ago, along with some dried beef and a jar of preserves. "You hungry?" "Yes." The word came out almost as a gasp, and Cole realized the boy was probably starving. "All right then. You help yourself to as much as you want. There's milk in the cold cellar if you want some." He showed Henry where everything was, then went back to preparing the willow bark tea. While the water boiled, he found himself studying the boy as he ate. The way he forced himself to take small bites despite his obvious hunger, how he kept glancing toward the stairs as if expecting someone to burst through the door at any moment, the tension in his narrow shoulders that never quite eased. "How long have you been on the road?" Cole asked, keeping his voice casual. Henry looked up sharply, swallowing his mouthful of bread. You said no questions. You're right. I did. Cole turned his attention back to the steaming kettle. Forget I asked. A pause. Then, 3 months, maybe longer. I lose track sometimes. Cole nodded, pouring the boiling water over the willow bark and letting it steep. The kitchen filled with the tea's bitter, earthy smell. That's a long time to be running. We're not running. Henry's voice was defensive. We're just traveling. Okay. We are. Mama says we're going to California. Says there's opportunities there. California's a long way from Montana territory. I know where it is. Henry's jaw set stubbornly. I can read maps. I bet you can. Cole strained the tea into a cup, then added a generous spoonful of honey to cut the bitterness. You seem like a smart kid. I'm not a kid. I'm 8. You're right. My apologies. Cole picked up the cup carefully. I'm going to take this up to your sister. You finish eating, and then there's a pump out back if you want to wash up. Towels are in the cupboard by the door. Henry nodded, already reaching for another piece of bread. Upstairs, Cole found Eliza exactly where he'd left her, perched on the edge of the bed, with May's hand clasped in both of hers. She looked up when he entered, and the raw fear in her eyes made his chest tighten. She's so hot, Eliza whispered. I can't get her to wake up properly. Here. Cole sat on the other side of the bed and gently lifted May's head, cradling it in the crook of his arm. May, honey, I need you to take a few sips of this. It'll help you feel better. The little girl's eyes fluttered, but didn't open. Cole pressed the cup to her lips, tilting it carefully so just a small amount trickled into her mouth. She swallowed reflexively, coughed, then swallowed again. That's good, Cole murmured. That's real good. Just a little more. Over the next few minutes, he coaxed nearly half the cup into her, patient and steady, while Eliza watched with tears streaming silently down her face. When's the last time she ate anything? Cole asked. Yesterday morning, some hardtack and a bit of dried apple. Eliza's voice was hollow. She hasn't wanted anything since then. All right, we'll try some broth later once the tea starts working on the fever, and we'll keep getting fluids into her. That's the most important thing right now. Eliza nodded, wiping at her eyes with the back of her hand. I'm sorry. I don't usually fall apart like this. You're not falling apart. You're being a mother. Cole set the cup on the bedside table and gently lowered May's head back to the pillow. You've been doing it all on your own for a while now, haven't you? Eliza's face crumpled slightly, and for a moment Cole thought she might really break down, but she pulled herself together with visible effort, straightening her spine and taking a shaky breath. My husband died 18 months ago, she said quietly. Accident at the mill where he worked. They said it was quick, that he didn't suffer. I don't know if that's true or if they just tell widows that to make them feel better. I'm sorry. After he died, the mill owner said we had to leave the company house. Said he needed it for the new worker, so we moved in with my husband's brother and his wife. They said we could stay as long as we needed, but... She laughed bitterly. Turns out, as long as we needed meant about 3 months. Then suddenly there were all these debts my husband supposedly owed, bills I'd never heard of, promissory notes with his signature that didn't quite look right, and his brother said we'd have to work them off, me and Henry both. Cole's jaw tightened. How much did they claim you owed? $200. Eliza's hands clenched in her lap. $200 that appeared out of nowhere 6 months after my husband died. And when I questioned it, when I asked to see proof of these debts, his brother got angry. Said I was calling him a liar. Said family takes care of family, and if I wasn't willing to do my part, maybe I should just take my children and leave. So you left. I took what I could carry, and we walked out in the middle of the night. She looked down at May's flushed face. I thought maybe if we could get far enough away, start fresh somewhere else, we'd be all right. But it's hard to find work when you're a woman with 2 children and no references. And the money I had ran out faster than I expected. And then May got sick and Her voice broke. I didn't know what to do. I still don't know what to do. Cole was quiet for a moment, watching the shallow rise and fall of May's chest. You did what you had to do. You kept your children safe. Safe? Eliza's laugh was harsh. I've been dragging them across half the territory with barely enough food, sleeping rough, drinking from creeks that might not be clean. That's not keeping them safe. That's just surviving. Barely. Surviving is something, Cole said, especially when the world's set up to make it as hard as possible. Eliza looked at him then, really looked at him, and something in her expression shifted. Why are you helping us? Really? It can't just be because of your daughter. Cole thought about lying, about giving her some comfortable platitude that would smooth over the question, but she'd been lied to enough already. 5 years ago, when Sarah and Emma died, I was ready to die too, he said quietly. Didn't see much point in going on without them. But my neighbor, old Jim Blackwell, he came by every day for months. Brought food I didn't eat, fixed things I didn't care about, sat on my porch and talked to me even when I wouldn't talk back. And one day I asked him why he bothered, when it was clear I didn't want help. What did he say? He said, because someone bothered with me once when I needed it, and the only way to pay that back is to pass it forward. Cole met her eyes. I don't know if helping you and your children makes up for Jim helping me, but I figure it's a start. Eliza held his gaze for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Thank you for being honest. It's all I know how to be. A sound from downstairs, the back door opening, then closing. Henry's footsteps crossing the kitchen floor. I should go check on him, Eliza said, but she didn't move, her eyes fixed on May. You stay here. Rest. I'll look after Henry. I can't just... Yes, you can. Cole stood, heading for the door. You're exhausted, Mrs. Warren. When's the last time you slept? I don't remember. Then sleep now. I'll wake you if May needs you, but right now the best thing you can do for her is let your body recover so you have the strength to take care of her properly. Eliza looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion won out. She kicked off her worn boots and lay down on the bed beside May, curling her body protectively around her daughter. Just an hour, she murmured, already half asleep. Take as long as you need. Cole closed the door quietly behind him and headed back downstairs. The afternoon wore on, the heat refusing to break despite the lengthening shadows. Cole found Henry in the barn, standing near Ash's stall with his hand outstretched, letting the horse sniff his palm. He's a good horse, Henry said without turning around. What's his name? Ash. On account of his color. Makes sense. Henry's hand moved to stroke the horse's nose. We had a horse once, before Pa died. A mare named Daisy. She was old and slow, but she was gentle. Uncle sold her after we came to stay with him. Said she wasn't worth the feed. Cole leaned against a support post, studying the boy. You know much about horses? Some. Pa taught me how to brush them down, how to clean their hooves. Said a man who can handle horses is never out of work. Your pa was right about that. Henry was quiet for a moment, then said, Is my sister going to die? The question was asked in the same tone Henry might use to ask about the weather, calm, factual, braced for bad news. It was the voice of a child who'd already lost too much and was preparing to lose more. I don't think so, Cole said honestly. The fever's bad, but she's young and strong. With rest and water and the willow bark tea, I think she'll pull through. But you don't know for sure. No, I don't know for sure. Nobody does. Henry nodded, accepting this. Mama's scared. She tries to hide it, but I can tell. Being scared doesn't make her weak. It makes her human. I'm scared too. Henry's voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But I can't show it, because then Mama gets more scared, and May doesn't understand what's happening half the time anyway, so someone has to be brave. Cole pushed off from the post and walked over to stand beside the boy. You want to know a secret? Henry looked up at him. Being brave doesn't mean not being scared. It means being scared and doing what needs to be done anyway. Cole put a hand on Henry's shoulder, feeling the thin bones beneath his palm. You've been taking care of your family for months now, keeping them safe, staying strong even when you were probably terrified. That's the bravest thing I can think of. And it's okay to be tired of being brave. It's okay to let someone else carry that weight for a while. Henry's face crumpled, and suddenly he was crying, deep, wrenching sobs that shook his whole body. Cole did the only thing he could think of. He pulled the boy into a hug, letting him cry against his chest while Ash watched with dark, gentle eyes. "It's all right," Cole murmured. "Let it out. You're safe here. I've got you." Henry cried for a long time, months of fear and exhaustion and grief pouring out all at once. Cole just held him, steady and silent, until the sobs gradually quieted into hiccups and then to shaky breaths. "Sorry," Henry mumbled into Cole's shirt. "Nothing to be sorry for." "I got your shirt all wet. It'll dry." Cole released him gently, giving the boy space to step back and wipe at his face with his sleeve. "Feel better?" Henry considered this, then nodded. "Yeah, a little." "Good. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm hungry enough to eat a horse. Not Ash, though. Different horse." A small smile tugged at Henry's lips despite everything. "That's a stupid joke." "You're right. It is. But it made you smile, so I'm counting it as a win." Cole headed for the barn door. "Come on, let's see about getting some supper together." They worked side by side in the kitchen as evening fell, Cole teaching Henry how to make biscuits while a pot of vegetable stew simmered on the stove. The boy was quick to learn, his hands nimble despite their small size, and Cole found himself thinking about what it might have been like to teach these things to his own daughter, if she'd lived. The thought brought the familiar ache, but it was gentler now, worn smooth by time like a river stone. "Can I ask you something?" Henry said, carefully cutting the biscuit dough into circles with a tin cup. "Sure. Why do you live all the way out here by yourself?" Cole stirred the stew, considering his answer. "After my wife and daughter died, I found I didn't much like being around people anymore. Too many questions, too many pitying looks. Out here it's just me and the land and the animals. They don't ask me how I'm doing or tell me time heals all wounds or any of that. Does it? Heal wounds, I mean, time. I don't know, it does something. The pain doesn't go away exactly, but it changes, gets easier to carry." Cole glanced at the boy. "You thinking about your pa?" Henry nodded. "Sometimes I can't remember his face exactly. I know what he looked like, but when I try to picture him, it's all fuzzy. That makes me feel bad, like I'm forgetting him." "You're not forgetting him. You remember the important things. That he loved you. That he taught you about horses. That he wanted you to have a good life. That's what matters. Not whether you can picture his face perfectly." "I guess." They finished preparing the meal in companionable silence, and Cole carried a tray upstairs while Henry set the table. He knocked softly on Emma's door. He was going to have to start thinking of it as Eliza's room if they stayed more than tonight, and opened it when he heard a quiet, "Come in." Eliza was awake, sitting up with May's head in her lap. The little girl's eyes were open, clearer than they had been earlier, and when she saw Cole, she managed a small smile. "There she is," Cole said, pleased. "Feeling better?" "Thirsty," May whispered. "Well, I can fix that." He set the tray on the dresser and poured a cup of water from the pitcher he'd brought up earlier. May drank deeply, some of it spilling down her chin, but she managed to empty half the cup before lying back with a sigh. "The fever's down," Eliza said, wonder in her voice. "Not gone, but definitely down. Willow bark works fast when you catch it in time." Cole handed her a bowl of stew. "You should eat, both of you." "I'm not hungry," May murmured, already drifting back to sleep. "That's all right. The hunger will come back once the fever breaks completely." Cole turned to Eliza. "How about you?" She took the bowl with trembling hands. "Thank you. For everything. I don't know how to repay you." "I don't want repayment. I want you to eat that stew before it gets cold." A ghost of a smile crossed her face, and she raised a spoonful to her lips. Cole watched her eat, noting how thin she was beneath the layers of dirt and exhaustion. You could count her ribs through her dress, see the sharpness of her collarbones and wrists. "When you're finished, there's a bathhouse out back with a tub and a stove to heat water," he said. "I'll make sure it's ready if you want to clean up." Eliza's eyes filled with tears. "A bath?" "Nothing fancy, but the water's clean and I've got soap." "I can't remember the last time." She shook her head. "That would be wonderful, thank you." "I'll get it ready now. Take your time with the stew." Cole headed back downstairs where Henry was already eating at the kitchen table. He joined the boy and they shared their meal in easy quiet, the kind that comes from being too tired for unnecessary conversation but comfortable enough not to need it. After supper, Cole went out to the small bathhouse, really just a shed with a copper tub and a wood stove, and began heating water. It took the better part of an hour to fill the tub with enough hot water for a decent bath, but he didn't mind the work. It gave him time to think about what came next. Eliza had said they'd stay one night and then move on, but May wasn't well enough to travel yet, and even when she was, where would they go? 3 months on the road had already nearly killed them. How much farther could they possibly make it on foot with no money and a sick child? And then there was the matter of whoever they were running from. Eliza hadn't given details, but Cole could fill in the blanks well enough. Debts, real or manufactured. Family members who saw an opportunity to exploit a widow and her children. Maybe even someone who'd come looking for them, unwilling to let their meal ticket slip away. Cole had a feeling that one night was going to turn into something longer, whether Eliza planned for it or not. When the bath was ready, he found her still sitting with May, who had fallen into a deeper, more peaceful sleep. "Bath's ready when you are," he said from the doorway. "I'll sit with May, so you can take your time." "I shouldn't leave her, Mrs. Warren." Cole's voice was gentle but firm. "I raised a daughter for 5 years. I know how to sit with a sick child. Go take your bath. I promise I'll come get you if anything changes." Eliza hesitated, then nodded. She stood slowly, as if her body was one giant ache, and moved toward the door. As she passed him, she paused. "Call me Eliza," she said quietly. "Mrs. Warren sounds like someone I used to be." "Eliza, then." She gave him a small, tired smile and headed downstairs. Cole settled into the chair beside the bed, listening to May's steady breathing and the distant sounds of Eliza moving around downstairs. Through the window, he could see the last light fading from the sky, stars beginning to emerge in the deep blue overhead. For 5 years, this house had been a mausoleum, a place of silence and memory, inhabited by ghosts. But tonight, with the sounds of living people moving through its rooms, with a child sleeping in Emma's bed and the smell of cooking still lingering in the air, it felt different. It felt like a home again. The thought scared him more than he wanted to admit. The first full day at the Broken Creek began before sunrise, as most days on a working ranch did. Cole woke to the familiar chorus of roosters and the soft lowing of cattle in the distance, his body moving through its morning routine on instinct, boots on, shirt buttoned, hat grabbed from the peg by the door. He was halfway down the stairs before he remembered he wasn't alone anymore, and the realization made him pause mid-step, one hand on the worn banister. Voices drifted up from the kitchen. Quiet ones, careful not to wake anyone still sleeping. He found Eliza standing at the stove, her back to him, stirring something in a pot. She'd changed into a clean dress, one of Sarah's old ones that Cole had pulled from a trunk last night, unable to watch her put that filthy calico back on after her bath. It hung loose on her thinner frame, but the deep green color brought out the warmth in her skin, and her hair, freshly washed and braided, caught the lamplight like polished wood. Henry sat at the table, already dressed, watching his mother with those solemn eyes. "Morning," Cole said, and Eliza jumped, nearly dropping the spoon. "Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to." She gestured helplessly at the stove. "You've done so much for us already, and I thought the least I could do was make breakfast, but I should have asked first. I wasn't thinking—" "Eliza," Cole's voice cut through her rambling gently. "It's fine, more than fine. I appreciate it." She let out a breath, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. "I found oatmeal in the pantry, and there were eggs. I hope that's all right." "It's perfect." He moved to the coffee pot, which was already brewing, and poured himself a cup. The smell alone was enough to finish waking him up. "How's May?" "Still sleeping. Her fever broke completely around 3 this morning." Eliza's smile was tremulous but genuine. "I checked on her just before I came down. She's breathing easier." "That's good news." "It's more than good news. It's—" Her voice caught. "It's everything." Cole nodded, understanding what she couldn't quite say, that for a few terrible hours yesterday, she'd thought she might lose her daughter, and now, in the cool light of morning, May was going to be all right. Sometimes the relief of a disaster averted hit harder than the disaster itself. They ate breakfast together as the sun began to paint the eastern sky in shades of pink and gold. Henry was unusually talkative, asking questions about the ranch, the animals, how far it was to the nearest town. Cole answered patiently, recognizing the questions for what they were. A child's attempt to map out his new territory, to understand the boundaries of this temporary safe place. "Can I see the horses?" Henry asked, scraping up the last of his oatmeal. "The ones in the pasture." "After you help your mother clean up," Cole said. "Everyone pulls their weight on a ranch." Henry nodded seriously, already gathering dishes. Eliza opened her mouth as if to protest, then closed it again, seeming to recognize that Cole was offering her son something more valuable than leisure, purpose, structure, the dignity of useful work. 20 minutes later, Cole and Henry walked out into the fresh morning air, leaving Eliza to sit with May. The heat hadn't yet climbed to its suffocating afternoon heights, and a breeze carried the scent of grass and livestock and earth. "How many horses do you have?" Henry asked as they approached the fence line. "4, counting Ash, the mare and her yearling colt over there, and the old gelding by the water trough." Cole pointed to each animal in turn. "Used to have more, but I sold most of them off after I didn't need so many." "Can I pet them?" "If they let you. Horses are good judges of character. If one doesn't want to come near you, don't force it." But the animals, perhaps sensing the boy's gentle nature, or simply curious about a new presence, approached the fence readily enough. Henry's face lit up as the mare lowered her head for his tentative touch, and Cole felt something in his chest ease at the sight. They spent an hour moving through the morning chores, feeding chickens, checking the cattle in the near pasture, examining fence posts for damage. Henry worked without complaint, absorbing Cole's instructions like a sponge, and Cole found himself appreciating the company more than he'd expected. 5 years was a long time to talk to no one but yourself and the occasional ranch hand passing through. "Mr. Maddox?" Henry said as they hauled a bucket of grain toward the chicken coop. "Told you, it's just Cole." "Cole, then." The boy hesitated, choosing his words carefully. "How long can we stay? Really?" Cole set down his bucket and studied Henry's face, the hope and fear warring there, the way the boy was already bracing himself for disappointment. "As long as you need to," he said. "But Mama said one night—" "Your Mama said that because she's been hurt enough times to know better than to trust easy promises. But I meant what I told her. There's no strings attached here. You can stay until May's completely well, until your mother's had time to rest and figure out what comes next. A week, 2 weeks, a month. However long it takes." "And then what?" Henry's voice was small. "We just start walking again? Try to make it to California with no money and no horse?" "I don't know yet, but we'll figure something out." Cole picked up his bucket again. "Come on. These chickens won't feed themselves." The rest of the morning passed in a rhythm of work and quiet conversation. Cole showed Henry how to collect eggs without spooking the hens, how to check a cow's hooves for stones, how to read the weather by the shape of clouds on the horizon. The boy absorbed it all with an intensity that spoke of a hunger for knowledge, for skills, for anything that might help him protect his family. They were heading back toward the house when Cole spotted the dust cloud on the eastern road. His hand went instinctively to the rifle he'd started carrying again after yesterday, and Henry noticed the movement immediately. "What is it?" The boy's voice went tight with fear. "Probably nothing. Could be Jim Blackwell stopping by to check on me." But Cole's instincts, honed by years of reading the land and its dangers, told him otherwise. That dust cloud was moving too fast, too purposefully. "Henry, go inside. Find your mother. Tell her to stay in the house with May until I come get you." "But—" "Now, Henry." The boy ran, and Cole moved to the front porch, leaning the rifle against the wall within easy reach, but not holding it yet. No need to escalate a situation that might turn out to be nothing. The riders came into view minutes later, 2 of them, pushing their horses harder than was wise in this heat. As they drew closer, Cole's jaw tightened. He didn't recognize the men, but he recognized the type. Hired muscle, the kind of men who did other people's dirty work for pay and asked no questions about whether that work was right or wrong. They reined in at the edge of his property, not bothering to dismount. Both were covered in trail dust, their faces hard and sun-weathered. The one on the left was lean and rangy, with a scar running from his temple to his jaw. The other was broader, heavier, with small eyes that calculated angles and advantages. "Help you gentlemen with something?" Cole kept his voice level, his posture relaxed but ready. The scarred one spat into the dust. We're looking for a woman, dark hair, 2 kids. Would have come through here yesterday, maybe. That so? She's wanted for theft, stole money from her family and ran off with it. The broader man spoke this time, his voice a rumble. Family just wants what's theirs back. Cole let the silence stretch, studying them. Neither man met his eyes directly, and their story had the rehearsed quality of a lie told too many times. Haven't seen anyone matching that description, he said finally. You sure about that? The scarred man's hand drifted toward his hip. Because we got word from folks in town that you left with a woman and 2 kids yesterday afternoon. Seemed real interested in helping them, apparently. I took some people in need to get water and rest. Common hospitality. Doesn't mean I know anything about stolen money or family disputes. Where are they now? Moved on this morning. Headed west, I think. Or maybe north. Didn't really pay attention to which direction they went. The lie came easily, and Cole backed it with steady eye contact and a shrug that said he couldn't care less about their quarry. But the broader man wasn't buying it. Mind if we take a look around, just to be sure? I do mind, actually. This is private property, and you 2 aren't welcome on it. The scarred man's face darkened. Now, that's not very neighborly. Neither is calling people thieves without proof and chasing them across half the territory. Cole's voice stayed calm, but something in his tone made both men shift in their saddles. I'll tell you what is neighborly, though. Respecting a man's right to refuse entry to strangers making accusations. We're not accusing you of anything, the broader man said, trying for reasonable and landing somewhere around threatening. Just doing our job. Your job. Cole let contempt seep into the words. And who's paying you for this job? What's the family name? The 2 men exchanged glances, and Cole knew he'd caught them. If this were legitimate, if there really were legal proceedings or genuine family concern, they'd have said the name immediately. The hesitation told him everything he needed to know. That's what I thought, Cole said quietly. So here's how this is going to go. You're going to turn those horses around and ride back the way you came, and if I see you on my land again, I'll assume you're here to cause trouble, and I'll respond accordingly. You threatening us? The scarred man's hand hovered near his pistol now. Nope, just stating facts. Cole still hadn't reached for his rifle, but his body language shifted, subtle, barely noticeable, but enough to communicate that he was ready if they were stupid enough to start something. I'm a simple rancher living on my own property. You 2 are trespassers making threats. Law's pretty clear on who's in the right here. The law's a long way from here, the broader man said. True enough, which means if something were to happen, say if 2 strangers got shot on a man's property after refusing to leave when asked, sheriff probably wouldn't ride all the way out here to investigate too hard. Might just take my word for it that I felt threatened and acted in self-defense. Cole let that sink in, watching their faces calculate the odds. They were tough men, used to intimidating people, but they weren't stupid. 2 against 1 might seem like good odds until you factored in that the one was on his own land with cover and high ground, while they were sitting exposed on tired horses. This isn't over, the scarred man finally said, jerking his horse's head around. Seems pretty over to me. They rode off, not quite as fast as they'd arrived, but with enough speed to kick up another cloud of dust. Cole watched until they were out of sight, then kept watching for another 5 minutes to make sure they weren't circling back. Only when he was certain they were truly gone did he pick up his rifle and head inside. He found Eliza in the parlor, standing behind the sofa with a kitchen knife gripped in her white-knuckled hand. Henry was beside her, holding a fireplace poker, and even May had been moved downstairs, wrapped in a blanket on the sofa, her feverish eyes wide and frightened. They're gone, Cole said immediately, and watched Eliza's shoulders slump with relief. The knife clattered from her hand onto the sofa cushions. Were they? Her voice shook. Did they say why? They were looking for a woman and 2 children, said something about stolen money and family. Cole set his rifle down carefully. I told them I hadn't seen anyone matching that description. They won't believe that. Eliza sank onto the sofa beside May, pulling the girl close. They'll be back. Maybe, but now they know I'm not going to just hand you over. That changes things. You shouldn't have lied for us. But even as she said it, Eliza was looking at him with something like wonder. You don't even know us. You don't know if we really did steal anything. Did you? No, of course not. Everything I said yesterday was true. Those debts were made up, designed to keep us trapped and working for my brother-in-law for free. When I realized what he was doing, that he'd never let us leave because we were too valuable as unpaid labor. She broke off, swallowing hard. I took what little money I'd managed to save from selling my wedding silver, and we left. Then you didn't steal anything. You escaped something that was wrong. Cole moved to the window, scanning the horizon for any sign of returning riders. Those men will probably report back to whoever hired them. Your brother-in-law, I'm guessing? Eliza nodded miserably. And he'll have to decide if it's worth the trouble to push harder. Men like that, they usually back down when they meet real resistance. It's easier to find a new target than to fight someone who fights back. You don't know Thomas, Eliza said quietly. He's not the type to let go of something he thinks belongs to him. And he thinks we belong to him. Well, he's wrong. And if he sends those men back or comes himself, he'll find out just how wrong he is. Cole turned from the window to face her. Eliza, I need you to understand something. I didn't just lie to those men on a whim. I lied because what's happening to you is wrong, and I'm not going to be part of it, which means I'm in this now, all the way. So you can stop thinking about leaving in a day or two. You're staying here until we figure out a real plan, one that doesn't end with you walking across the territory with a sick child and those vultures picking up your trail again. Tears spilled down Eliza's cheeks, but she didn't look away. Why? Why would you do this for strangers? Because I can. Because it's right. And because... Cole paused, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. Because this house has been dead for 5 years. And having you here, having life here again, having a reason to care about something beyond just making it through another day. Maybe I need that as much as you need shelter. The honesty of it hung in the air between them, raw and uncomfortable and true. Henry, who'd been silent through the whole exchange, finally spoke up. Mr. Cole, those men, they looked mean. They were mean. But mean doesn't always win. Cole tried for a reassuring smile. Sometimes stubborn beats mean. And I can be plenty stubborn when I need to be. What if they come back with more men? Then we'll deal with it. But I don't think they will. Not right away. They'll need to report to whoever sent them, and that person will need to decide what to do next. That gives us time. Time for what? Eliza asked. Time to make sure you're really safe. Time to figure out what comes next that isn't just running until you drop. Cole moved toward the kitchen. But first, time for lunch. Can't think on an empty stomach. And I don't know about you all, but facing down 2 hired thugs works up an appetite. The attempt at lightness felt forced, but May managed a small smile, and Henry's grip on the fireplace poker finally loosened. Eliza just looked at Cole with an expression he couldn't quite read. Gratitude mixed with something else, something deeper and more complicated. They ate a quiet lunch of cold chicken and bread, and afterward Cole insisted that Eliza rest while he took Henry outside to continue the morning's interrupted lessons. The boy needed the distraction, needed to feel useful and capable rather than helpless and scared. But as the afternoon wore on and the heat climbed toward its peak, Cole found his attention constantly drifting toward the eastern horizon, watching for dust clouds, for riders, for trouble. It didn't come that day, or the next, or the day after that. 3 days passed in a strange new rhythm. Eliza gradually took over more of the household tasks, cooking, cleaning, tending the vegetable garden that Cole had let go half wild. She moved through the house like a woman learning to breathe again, and Cole watched her shoulders slowly unknot, her face lose some of its hunted expression. May recovered her strength with the resilience of the young. By the 4th day, she was well enough to venture outside, and Cole found her sitting on the porch steps watching a line of ants carry crumbs twice their size. They're very determined, she said seriously when Cole sat down beside her. That they are. Mama says determination is important, says it's what keeps us going even when things are hard. Your mama's right. May looked up at him with those solemn brown eyes. Are you determined too? I suppose I am. That's good. She went back to watching the ants. Henry says you're a good man. He says you're helping us even though you don't have to, which makes you better than most people. Cole's throat tightened. Henry's a smart kid. He is. He takes care of us. Sometimes I think he forgets he's supposed to be a kid too. May traced an ant's path with her finger, not quite touching it. I'm glad we found you. Or you found us. I don't remember exactly how it happened. I'm glad too. That evening, after the children were in bed, Cole and Eliza sat on the porch while the last light drained from the sky. The heat had finally broken slightly, and a cool breeze carried the smell of coming rain. I've been thinking, Eliza said, not looking at him, about what you said, about staying until we figure out a real plan. All right? I don't have much to offer in return for your hospitality. No money, obviously. But I can work. I'm good with accounts. I used to help my husband with the mill's books. And I can sew, cook, clean, whatever you need. Eliza, please. Let me do this. Let me feel like I'm contributing something, not just taking charity. Cole was quiet for a moment, then nodded. All right, the ranch books are a mess. I haven't balanced them properly in months. If you want to take that on, I'd be grateful. Thank you. She finally looked at him, and in the fading light her face was soft, vulnerable. I know I keep saying that. Thank you. But I don't think I've really made you understand what you've done for us. You saved May's life. You've given us hope when I'd forgotten what that felt like. She broke off, and Cole saw tears gathering in her eyes again. You've reminded me that not everyone in the world is cruel or selfish. That kindness still exists. That's a bigger gift than you know. I'm just doing what needs doing. No, you're doing more than that. She struggled for words. You're giving us a chance to be human again instead of just survivors. They sat in silence after that, watching fireflies begin their evening dance across the darkening grass. Somewhere in the distance, cattle called to each other, and closer by, one of the horses whinnied softly. The sounds of a working ranch settling in for the night, familiar and peaceful. Cole found himself thinking about what came next. Those men would be back eventually. He was certain of it. Men like that didn't give up after one refusal. They'd return with more people, or with legal papers, real or forged, or they'd try something sneaky like waiting for Cole to leave and then approaching Eliza directly. He needed to be ready, needed to have a plan beyond just standing his ground and hoping his stubbornness would be enough. Tomorrow, he said, I think I'll ride into town. Talk to the sheriff, let him know what's happening. Get it on record that you're under my protection. Eliza tensed. What if the sheriff sides with Thomas? What if he has papers? Then we'll deal with it, but at least we'll know what we're facing. Cole looked over at her. Right now, we're operating blind. That needs to change. All right? She nodded slowly. You're right. We can't just hide here forever. You're not hiding. You're recovering. There's a difference. The next morning, Cole saddled Ash and prepared for the ride into Redemption Falls. Eliza watched from the porch, worrying her lower lip between her teeth, while Henry stood at Ash's head, stroking the horse's nose. You'll be careful, Eliza called. Always am. And if those men are in town, then I'll handle it. Cole swung into the saddle, settling his weight with practiced ease. Henry, you're the man of the house while I'm gone. You take care of your mother and sister. Henry straightened, nodding seriously. Yes, sir. Cole. Yes, Cole. The ride to town took about an hour at an easy pace, giving Cole plenty of time to think about what he'd say to Sheriff Tom Crawford. Tom was a decent enough man, honest within the limits of his position, but he was also practical. He wouldn't want trouble if he could avoid it, and he might not see the point in protecting a woman with no legal standing from a man claiming to be her family. Cole would have to make him see it differently. Redemption Falls looked exactly as it had a week ago. 3 buildings baking under the merciless sun, a handful of people moving through their business with the slow caution of those trying to avoid heat stroke. Cole tied Ash in the shade and headed for the sheriff's office, a small structure wedged between the general store and what optimistically called itself a saloon. Tom Crawford was at his desk, paperwork spread out in front of him, a cup of coffee gone cold at his elbow. He looked up when Cole entered, surprise crossing his weathered face. Cole Maddox, don't usually see you in town twice in 1 week. Something wrong? Depends on your definition of wrong. Cole took off his hat, turning it in his hands. Need to talk to you about a situation at my ranch. All right. Tom leaned back in his chair, which creaked under his weight. What kind of situation? Cole laid out the facts methodically, finding Eliza and the children, taking them in, the visit from the two men, the accusations of theft. He didn't embellish or editorialize, just presented the information and waited for Tom's response. The sheriff listened without interrupting, his expression growing more troubled as Cole talked. When Cole finished, Tom was quiet for a long moment, staring at his cold coffee. You're putting me in a difficult position here, Cole. I know. These men, you get their names? They didn't offer, and I didn't ask. So we don't know who sent them, don't know if there's legal justification for their claims, don't know anything except what this woman told you. Tom shook his head. You see my problem? I do, but Tom, these men weren't lawmen. They were hired muscle, and the woman's story holds up. Widow with 2 kids, husband died over a year ago, family member trying to exploit them for free labor. It's not exactly an uncommon tale. No, it's not. But it's also not uncommon for people to run off with money that isn't theirs and make up stories to justify it. Cole's jaw tightened. You think I can't tell the difference between a con artist and a desperate mother? I think you've been alone a long time, and maybe... Tom raised a hand before Cole could interrupt. I'm not saying she's lying. I'm saying I need more than your gut feeling before I can officially take sides in a family dispute. This isn't a family dispute. It's exploitation. Maybe. Probably even. But unless the woman wants to file formal charges against this brother-in-law, unless she's willing to go on record with her accusations, my hands are tied. Cole stood, frustration making his movements sharp. So what are you saying? That if those men come back, you won't do anything? I'm saying that right now, based on what you've told me, I can't justify sending deputies out to your place or warning those men off. Tom stood too, meeting Cole's eyes levelly. But I'm also saying that if they come onto your property after you've told them to leave, that's trespassing, and you have every right to defend yourself and anyone under your roof. Self-defense is clear in the law, Cole. You know that. It wasn't the answer Cole wanted, but it was something, a confirmation that if things escalated, the law would at least consider his side. All right, Cole said finally. Thanks for your time, Tom. Cole, wait! The sheriff moved around his desk. Look, I understand why you're doing this. And between you and me, I think you're probably right about the situation, but you need to be careful. If this brother-in-law is the type to send hired men after his sister-in-law, he's not going to stop just because some rancher told him no. You could be buying yourself a world of trouble here. Some trouble's worth buying. Maybe. Just watch your back. And if you need help, you know where to find me. Cole left the sheriff's office feeling unsettled. He'd hoped for more. For official protection. For Tom to agree to investigate. For something concrete he could take back to Eliza as proof that the law was on their side. Instead, he'd gotten permission to defend himself if attacked, which was something he already knew he had. He was heading back toward Ash when a voice called out behind him. Heard you're harboring a thief. Cole turned slowly. The scarred man from before stood in the shade of the general store, arms crossed, watching him with cold eyes. His companion was nowhere in sight, but Cole had no doubt he was nearby. Don't know what you're talking about, Cole said evenly. Sure you don't. The man pushed off from the wall, moving into the sun without seeming to notice the heat. See? My employer's getting impatient. Wants his property returned. His property? That's right. The woman, the kids, and the money she stole. People aren't property. Not anymore. Thought we settled that issue with a war about 20 years back. The scarred man's face darkened. You think you're clever, rancher? No, I think I'm right. And I think you should tell your employer that if he wants to discuss anything with Mrs. Warren, he can file his complaints with the law. Otherwise, he can leave her alone. It's Mr. Warren, actually, her brother-in-law. And he's tried being reasonable, tried asking nicely for her to come home and settle her debts. But she ran instead, and that makes this a different kind of conversation. Cole stepped closer, letting his voice drop. Here's the thing. I don't care who your employer is. I don't care what claims he thinks he has. The woman and her children are under my protection now, and they're staying that way until they decide otherwise. You come near my property again, and we'll have more than a conversation. That a threat? That's a promise. They stood 3 feet apart, both men calculating angles and odds. The street around them had gone quiet. People had noticed the confrontation and were staying well back, not wanting to get caught in whatever might happen next. Finally, the scarred man smiled, but there was no humor in it. "You're making a mistake, Maddox. A big one. Wouldn't be my first." The man turned and walked away, and Cole watched him go with his heart pounding harder than he wanted to admit. That had been a direct threat, barely veiled, and it meant that Eliza's brother-in-law, Thomas Warren, wasn't backing down. Things were about to get worse before they got better. Cole rode back to the ranch faster than he'd planned, urgency pushing him despite the heat. He needed to tell Eliza what had happened, needed to make sure she understood that this wasn't over, that her brother-in-law was escalating. But when the ranch came into view, everything looked peaceful. Eliza hanging laundry on the line behind the house, Henry working in the garden, May playing with a kitten that had wandered in from the barn. The domestic scene made his chest ache with something he couldn't name. Eliza saw him coming and set down her laundry basket, shading her eyes against the sun. Cole could see the tension in her posture, the way she held herself ready for bad news. He dismounted and told her everything: the conversation with the sheriff, the confrontation with the scarred man, Thomas Warren's name finally attached to the pursuit. She listened without interrupting, her face growing paler with each detail. "He won't stop," she said when Cole finished. "Thomas never stops when he thinks he's been wronged. And me leaving with the children, refusing to work off those fake debts. In his mind, that's the worst kind of betrayal." "Then we need to be ready." "For what? Cole, you can't fight off an army if he decides to send one." "No, but I can make it costly enough that he decides it's not worth the effort." Cole took her hands, feeling how cold they were despite the heat. "Eliza, listen to me. We're not helpless here. We've got supplies, defensible ground, and the law says I can protect my property. More than that, we've got time to prepare." "Prepare how?" "I have friends. Jim Blackwell, the neighbor I told you about. A few other ranchers in the area who owe me favors. I'll ride out tomorrow, let them know what's happening, ask them to keep an eye out. Thomas Warren might be willing to send hired men after a lone woman and her children, but he'll think twice about going after a rancher with allies." Hope flickered in Eliza's eyes, cautious and fragile. "You'd really do that? Call in favors for us?" "I would. I will." Cole squeezed her hands gently before releasing them. "You're not alone in this anymore. The sooner Thomas Warren understands that, the sooner he'll back off. And if he doesn't, then we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. But Eliza?" He waited until she met his eyes. "I need you to trust me. Really trust me. Can you do that?" She studied his face for a long moment, and Cole wondered what she saw there. If she could read the determination he felt, the unexpected fierceness of his desire to protect her and her children, the way her presence had woken something in him he'd thought died with Sarah and Emma. "Yes," she said finally. "I can do that. I do trust you." The words settled between them, weighted with meaning neither of them was quite ready to examine. That evening, after another shared meal and after the children had gone to bed, Cole sat on the porch with his rifle across his knees, watching the darkness and thinking about what came next. He heard the door open behind him, felt Eliza's presence before she spoke. "You don't have to stay up all night guarding us," she said softly. "Not planning to stay up all night, just until I'm satisfied no one's coming tonight." She sat down beside him, wrapping a shawl around her shoulders against the evening chill. They sat in companionable silence for a while, listening to the night sounds, crickets, distant coyotes, the soft shuffle of horses in the barn. "Thank you," Eliza said eventually. "I know I keep saying it, but you don't need to keep thanking me." "Yes, I do. Because what you're doing, it's extraordinary. And I need you to know that I see it, that I understand what you're risking for people you barely know." Cole turned to look at her, finding her face soft and open in the moonlight. "I know you better than you think. I know you're strong and smart, and you'd do anything for your children. I know you're scared, but you won't let that fear paralyze you. I know you've been hurt, but you haven't let it make you cruel. That's enough. That's more than enough." Eliza's breath caught, and for a moment Cole thought she might cry. But instead, she reached over and took his hand, threading her fingers through his. "You're a good man, Cole Maddox. Better than you probably think you are." He didn't know how to respond to that, so he just held her hand and watched the stars wheel slowly overhead and let himself imagine, just for a moment, what it might be like if this wasn't temporary, if she and the children stayed not just until the danger passed, but longer, permanently, making this dead house live again. It was a dangerous thought, one that could lead to all kinds of complications and heartbreak. But sitting there with Eliza's hand warm in his, Cole found he didn't care about the danger. Some risks, he was beginning to learn, were worth taking. The morning after their conversation on the porch, Cole rode out before dawn to visit Jim Blackwell. The old rancher's property lay 8 miles to the southwest, tucked into a valley where a spring-fed creek ran year-round, even in the worst droughts. Cole had known Jim for nearly 15 years, ever since he'd first bought the broken creek, and the man had proven himself a friend in the truest sense during those dark months after Sarah and Emma died. If anyone would help without asking too many questions, it would be Jim. The sun was just clearing the horizon when Cole spotted Jim's weathered barn and the small herd of cattle grazing in the pasture beyond. Smoke rose from the chimney of the main house, and Cole could smell coffee and bacon on the morning air. His stomach growled, reminding him he'd skipped breakfast in his hurry to leave. Jim emerged onto his porch before Cole even dismounted, a coffee cup in one gnarled hand and a rifle in the other. The old man relaxed when he recognized his visitor, leaning the rifle against the doorframe. "Cole Maddox, as I live and breathe, twice in 1 month. Must be something important to get you socializing this much." Jim's voice was rough with age and years of shouting over cattle, but his eyes were sharp and knowing. "Need to talk to you about a situation, Jim." "Figured as much. Come on in. Coffee's hot, and Martha's got enough breakfast for an army." Inside, Jim's wife, Martha, fussed over Cole like she always did, piling his plate high with eggs and bacon and fresh biscuits while clucking about how thin he'd gotten. Cole ate gratefully while Jim watched him with that patient, assessing gaze that missed nothing. When Martha finally left them alone to tend to her garden, Jim leaned back in his chair and said, "All right, out with it." Cole told him everything, starting with finding Eliza and the children behind the general store and ending with yesterday's confrontation in town. Jim listened without interrupting, his weathered face growing more troubled as the story unfolded. "So let me make sure I understand," Jim said when Cole finished. "You've taken in a woman and her kids who are being hunted by her brother-in-law's hired men. This brother-in-law, Thomas Warren, is claiming she stole from him, but you believe she's telling the truth about manufactured debts. And now you're preparing for these men to come back with more force. That's about the size of it." Jim was quiet for a long moment, staring into his coffee cup like it held answers. Finally, he looked up and said, "You know what you're getting into here, Cole?" "I have some idea." "I don't think you do. Men like this Thomas Warren, men who treat family like property, they don't back down easy, especially when someone makes them look weak in front of their hired help." Jim shook his head. "This could get ugly, real ugly." "I know. And you're still willing to stand between this woman and whatever's coming?" Cole met Jim's eyes steadily. "I am. Why? And don't give me that line about it being the right thing to do. There's something else here. I can see it on your face." Cole was quiet, trying to find words for feelings he barely understood himself. "That house has been a tomb for 5 years, Jim. You know that better than anyone. But having them there, Eliza and Henry and little May, it's like someone opened all the windows and let the air in again. I can breathe there now. Does that make sense?" "More than you probably want it to." Jim's expression softened. "You're sweet on her." "I barely know her." "Doesn't always take long, especially when you've been alone as long as you have." Jim stood, moving to refill both their coffee cups. "I'm not judging, mind you. Just want to make sure you understand what you're really protecting here. It's not just about doing right by strangers anymore, is it?" "Maybe not, but that doesn't change the fact that they need help." "No, it doesn't." Jim returned to his seat, wrapping his hands around his cup. "All right, what do you need from me?" Relief flooded through Cole. "Just eyes and ears, mostly. If you see strangers asking questions or riders heading toward my place, send word. And if things go sideways, if I send Henry or one of the others to fetch you, I need to know you'll come." With my rifle and whoever else I can round up. Jim nodded firmly. You've got my word on that, and I'll ride over to the Patterson place this afternoon. Let them know what's happening. Tom Patterson owes you for helping with his barn raising last year. He'll stand with you if it comes to that. I appreciate it, Jim. Don't mention it. That's what neighbors do. The old man's face creased into something between a smile and a grimace. Besides, I never did like the idea of men thinking they can chase women and children across the territory like they're hunting animals. Sits wrong with me. Cole finished his coffee and stood, anxious to get back to the ranch. He'd been gone nearly 3 hours already, and every minute away made him uneasy. But as he headed for the door, Jim called after him. Cole? One more thing. Yeah? Don't let this Thomas Warren catch you somewhere vulnerable. Men like that, they'll wait until you're away from the ranch, then move in on the woman and kids when there's no one to stop them. Keep your guard up. All the time. The warning lodged in Cole's chest like a stone. I will. He rode back faster than he'd come, pushing Ash harder than he liked, but unable to shake the anxiety that had taken root in his gut. Jim's words kept echoing in his head. They'll wait until you're away from the ranch, then move in when there's no one to stop them. Cole had been a fool to leave them alone all morning. What if the men had already come back? What if right now, while he was miles away feeling good about securing help, Thomas Warren's hired thugs were dragging Eliza and the children away? By the time the ranch came into view, Cole was nearly standing in the stirrups, his eyes scanning desperately for any sign of trouble. But everything looked exactly as he'd left it. The house peaceful in the midday heat, laundry still hanging on the line, chickens scratching in their yard. He dismounted in a rush and was halfway to the house when Henry appeared in the doorway, his young face creased with concern. Cole, thank God you're back. Mama's been worried sick. She wouldn't say it, but I could tell. Everything all right here? No visitors? No, sir. No, Cole. Everything's been quiet, but Mama kept going to the window every few minutes, looking down the road. Cole felt his shoulders relax slightly. Where is she now? Kitchen, making lunch. May's helping, which mostly means she's making a mess with the flour. Henry's attempt at humor was undermined by the relief in his voice. Were you able to get help? I was. Jim Blackwell's spreading the word to the other ranchers. If trouble comes, we won't be facing it alone. Good. Henry's jaw set in that way that made him look far older than 8. Because I've been thinking, and I want to help too. When the bad men come back, I want to fight. Henry, I'm not a kid, Cole. I know how to shoot. Pa taught me before he died. And I can load a rifle almost as fast as you can. I've been watching. Cole knelt down so he was eye level with the boy. I know you're brave, Henry. I know you want to protect your family, but the best way you can help is by taking care of your mother and sister if things get dangerous. Can you do that? Can you get them to safety if I tell you to run? Conflict warred across Henry's face, pride and fear, and the desperate need to prove himself useful. Finally, he nodded reluctantly. If you tell me to, I'll get them safe. But I'm not running because I'm scared. I'm running because you told me to. That's all I'm asking. Cole squeezed the boy's shoulder. You're already the bravest person I know, Henry. You don't need to prove anything to anyone. They found Eliza in the kitchen, just as Henry had said, with Flower dusting her apron and May perched on a stool beside her, kneading dough with small, determined hands. Eliza looked up when they entered, and Cole saw the fear drain from her face, replaced by relief so profound it made his chest ache. You're back. Her voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly as she set down the bowl she'd been holding. Told you I would be. I know, She trailed off, glancing at the children. May, honey, why don't you take that dough outside and see if you can make some mud pies for the chickens? Henry, go with her? Henry looked like he wanted to protest, but something in his mother's tone made him comply. He took May's hand and led her toward the back door, and Cole heard the girl chattering happily about whether chickens liked mud pies as they disappeared outside. The moment they were alone, Eliza's composure cracked. I thought they'd come back while you were gone. Every time I heard a sound, a horse in the pasture, wind rattling the barn door, I was certain it was them. I kept the children inside all morning, away from the windows, and I had a knife within reach every moment, and I hated it. I hated being that afraid in the first place where I felt safe. Cole moved toward her, stopping just close enough that she could feel his presence without feeling crowded. I'm sorry. I should have told you where I was going, should have explained that I'd be gone for a few hours. You don't owe me explanations. This is your home. You can come and go as you please. It stopped being just my home the moment I invited you to stay. The words came out more intense than he'd intended, and Eliza's eyes widened slightly. You're not guests here anymore, Eliza. This is your home too, for as long as you need it, which means you have every right to know when I'm leaving and where I'm going and when I'll be back. Cole. She pressed a hand to her mouth, blinking rapidly. You can't keep saying things like that. You can't keep being this kind, this good, because I'm going to start believing it's real. And when we have to leave, what if you didn't have to leave? The question hung in the air between them, shocking in its directness. Cole hadn't planned to say it, hadn't even fully formed the thought himself until the words were already out. But now that they were spoken, he found he meant them completely. What are you saying? Eliza's voice was barely above a whisper. I'm saying that maybe the answer isn't finding a way to get you safely away from Thomas Warren. Maybe it's finding a way for you to stay here permanently. Make it so clear you're under my protection that he'd be a fool to try anything. How would we do that? Cole took a deep breath, knowing that what he was about to suggest would change everything. We could get married. Eliza stared at him like he'd spoken in a foreign language. Married? A marriage of convenience, Cole said quickly. Just on paper, just for protection. Your brother-in-law couldn't claim you owed him anything if you were married to someone else. And as my wife, you'd have legal standing here. The ranch would be your home by right, not just by my invitation. Cole, I can't ask you to do that. You're not asking, I'm offering. But marriage, even on paper, that's your whole life. You'd be tied to me, to my problems, to children who aren't yours. What if you met someone else? What if you wanted to actually get married someday, to someone you love? The pain that flickered across Cole's face made Eliza stop mid-sentence. When he spoke, his voice was quiet but firm. I was married to someone I loved. I had a child I loved more than breathing, and I lost them both in a single week. That kind of love, the kind that burns so bright it lights up your whole world, I'm not sure I'm capable of feeling it again. Maybe that part of me died with them. You don't know that, maybe not. But what I do know is that I care about you and your children. I care about keeping you safe. I care about seeing Henry smile when he's working with the horses, and hearing May's laugh when she's playing with the barn cats, and watching you relax when you think no one's looking. That might not be the same as what I had with Sarah, but it's real, it's good, and it's worth protecting. Eliza's tears spilled over, tracking through the flour dust on her cheeks. This is insane. We barely know each other. I know enough. I know you're strong and smart and you fight for what matters. I know you love your children more than anything. I know you've been dealt a terrible hand and you're still standing. That's enough for me. But what if it's not enough for you? What if a year from now or 5 years you wake up and regret tying yourself to us? What if I don't? Cole countered. What if this arrangement gives all of us something we need? You get protection and a home. I get a reason to care about something beyond just surviving day to day. The kids get stability and safety. Would that be so terrible? Eliza pressed both hands to her face, her shoulders shaking. Cole wanted to reach for her, but wasn't sure if the touch would be welcome, so he stood there feeling helpless while she cried. Finally, she lowered her hands and looked at him with red-rimmed eyes. You're serious about this. You're really, truly serious. I am. And you've thought it through? All the complications, all the ways this could go wrong? I've thought about it enough to know it's the right thing to do. The right thing, she repeated softly. Always back to that with you, isn't it? It's the only compass I've got. She studied his face for a long moment, and Cole made himself meet her gaze steadily, letting her see whatever she needed to see. He wasn't sure what that was. Honesty, certainly, and determination, and maybe something deeper that he wasn't ready to name yet. All right, she said finally, her voice shaking. If you're sure, if you really truly won't regret this, then yes, I'll marry you. Relief and something else, something that felt dangerously close to joy, flooded through Cole. You will? On one condition, we tell the children the truth. We explain that this is for protection, not romance. I won't have Henry and May thinking this is something it's not. Agreed. We'll be honest with them. And we tell them that if circumstances change, if you change your mind, or if I find a way to support us independently, this arrangement can end. I don't want them thinking I've trapped you into something permanent. Eliza, I'm the one who proposed this. I know, but children don't always understand nuance. I need them to know this is a choice you're making freely, one you can unmake if needed. Cole wanted to argue, wanted to say that he had no intention of unmaking anything, but he recognized the fear beneath her words. She'd been let down too many times, hurt by too many people who'd promised protection and delivered pain instead. She needed an escape route, even if she never used it. All right, he said, we'll make sure they understand. They stood in the kitchen, flour dust still hanging in the air, the smell of rising bread filling the space between them, and looked at each other as if seeing something new. Cole wasn't naive enough to think this solved all their problems. Thomas Warren would still be a threat. The practicalities of suddenly being a family would be complicated, and there were 100 ways this could blow up in both their faces. But for the first time in 5 years, Cole felt like he was moving towards something instead of just away from pain. And that, he thought, was worth almost any risk. They told the children that evening after supper, gathering them in the parlor while the last light faded outside. May sat on the sofa between Cole and Eliza, swinging her legs and humming to herself, oblivious to the tension in the room. Henry stood near the fireplace, his posture wary, clearly sensing that something important was coming. "Kids, we need to talk to you about something," Eliza began, her voice steadier than Cole expected. "Cole and I have been discussing ways to make sure we're safe here, that the bad men can't take us away." "Are we leaving?" Henry's question came out sharp with panic. "No, honey, we're not leaving. We're staying." Eliza reached out and took Cole's hand, and he felt the tremor in her fingers. "Cole has asked me to marry him, and I've said yes." May's face lit up like a sunrise. "You're getting married? Like in a fairy tale?" "Sort of, sweetness. But it's a little different than in stories." Eliza chose her words carefully. "Cole is offering to marry me so that legally, officially, we're his family. That way no one can say we don't belong here. No one can try to take us away." Henry's eyes narrowed, his sharp mind already working through the implications. "So it's not real. It's just pretend." "It's real in the ways that matter," Cole said, speaking up for the first time. "The marriage will be legal, recognized by the law. And my commitment to keeping you all safe, to treating you as family, that's absolutely real. What your mother means is that we're not getting married because we're in love like your parents were. We're getting married because it's the smart thing to do to protect all of us." "But you like each other, right?" May looked between them with concern, because in stories, people who don't like each other but get married anyway are always unhappy. "We like each other very much," Eliza assured her, smoothing the girl's hair. "Cole is a good man, and he's been kinder to us than anyone has in a long time. This isn't about not liking each other. It's about being honest that we haven't known each other very long." "How long do you have to know someone before you love them?" May asked, with the simple directness of a 5-year-old. Cole found himself without an answer. Eliza, too, seemed at a loss, and it was Henry who finally spoke up. "However long it takes, I guess. Everyone's different." He looked at Cole with those two old eyes. "Are you going to be our father?" The question hit Cole like a physical blow. He thought of Emma calling him Papa, of Sarah telling him he was going to be a father, and the joy that had flooded through him, of all the moments he'd thought he'd have with his daughter that death had stolen away. "I'll be your stepfather, officially," he said carefully. "But I won't try to replace your real father, Henry. He was your pa, and nothing changes that. What I can be is someone who looks after you, teaches you things, keeps you safe, someone you can count on." "Like family," Henry said slowly. "Exactly like family." Henry was quiet for a long moment, his face unreadable. Then he nodded once, sharp and decisive. "Okay. If it keeps Mama and May safe, then okay." "Henry," Eliza's voice broke slightly, "you don't have to be the one making this decision. This is between Cole and me. But it affects all of us, so we should all agree." Henry looked at his sister. "May, what do you think?" May considered this with the seriousness of a judge deliberating a case. "I think Cole is nice. He makes good biscuits, and he let me name the barn cats even though they already had names. and he doesn't get mad when I ask too many questions. So yes, I think we should stay. Then it's settled. Henry crossed his arms, a gesture that reminded Cole painfully of how young he actually was, despite his mature demeanor. When's the wedding? Soon, Cole said. Probably within the next few days. We'll ride into town, talk to the minister, make it official. Will there be cake? May asked hopefully. I'll make sure there's cake, Eliza promised, pulling her daughter close. After the children went to bed, Cole and Eliza found themselves back on the porch, the night air cool against their skin. They sat in their usual spots, but something had shifted between them, a weight of decision, of commitment made, of futures suddenly intertwined in ways neither had anticipated a week ago. Are you sure about this? Eliza asked for what felt like the 100th time. Really, truly sure? I'm sure. Are you? I think so. I'm terrified, but I'm sure. She laughed shakily. Does that make sense? Perfect sense. Cole leaned back against the porch post, watching the stars. I'm terrified too, if it helps. Of what? Of failing you. Of those men coming back and me not being strong enough or smart enough to stop them. Of Henry and May needing more than I know how to give. Of waking up one day and realizing I've made your life worse instead of better. Cole Maddox, you've literally saved our lives. I don't think you could make things worse if you tried. Give me time. I'm sure I'll find a way to disappoint you eventually. I doubt that. Eliza's voice was soft but certain. Everything I've seen from you tells me you're incapable of being less than honorable. They lapsed into comfortable silence, and Cole found himself thinking about what came next. The wedding itself would be simple. A trip to town, a few words from the minister, signatures on paper. But after that, after they returned to the ranch as husband and wife, what then? They'd have to figure out living arrangements, how to present themselves to others, how to navigate the strange intimacy of being married while remaining essentially strangers. We should probably discuss practicalities, Eliza said, as if reading his thoughts. Like sleeping arrangements. Cole felt heat creep up his neck. I'll stay in my room. You and the kids can keep the upstairs. That seems reasonable. And anything you need changed in the house, any way you want things organized differently, you just say so. This is your home now. Our home, Eliza corrected gently. It's our home. I don't want you to feel like you're a guest in your own house just because we're here. I won't, I promise. Another silence, less comfortable this time. Finally, Eliza said, What do we tell people? About why we're getting married so suddenly? The truth, mostly. That you're a widow who needed help, that I offered it, that marriage seemed like the most practical solution. People will gossip no matter what we say, but at least if we're straightforward, they can't accuse us of hiding something. They'll accuse us anyway, Eliza said with a bitter laugh. A woman with 2 children marrying a widower after knowing him for a week? They'll say I'm a fortune hunter, or that you're a fool, or both. Let them say what they want. We know the truth. And what is the truth, Cole? Really? Eliza turned to look at him, her face barely visible in the darkness. Is this really just about protection, or is there something else? The question was dangerous, pushing at territories neither of them was ready to explore. Cole thought about lying, about keeping things simple and uncomplicated, but Eliza deserved honesty. I don't know, he admitted. I know I care about you and the children. I know having you here has made me feel alive again in ways I'd forgotten were possible. I know that when I imagine you leaving, it feels wrong, like watching something precious slip through my fingers. But whether that's just because I've been alone too long, or because it's something deeper, I can't say yet. Maybe I'll never be able to say. That's fair, more than fair. Eliza's voice was thick with emotion. For what it's worth, I feel the same way. Like maybe there could be something real here someday. Or maybe we're just 2 broken people finding comfort in proximity. I don't know which it is. Maybe we don't need to know right now. Maybe we can just see what happens. See what happens, Eliza repeated. That might be the sanest thing either of us has said all day. They sat together until the night grew cold enough to drive them inside, neither quite ready to break the spell of honest conversation and shared uncertainty. When they finally parted at the top of the stairs, Eliza heading to her room, Cole to his. They exchanged quiet goodnights that felt weighted with more than simple courtesy. Cole lay in his bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the sounds of other people living in his house. Eliza moving around her room, Henry's soft snoring from across the hall, May talking in her sleep about chickens and mud pies. The sounds that had been missing for 5 years, that he'd convinced himself he'd never need to hear again. He'd meant what he said about not knowing if what he felt was real or just the echo of loneliness. But lying there in the darkness, Cole found himself hoping, tentatively, carefully, like a man reaching for something he's not sure won't disappear, that maybe it could become real, that maybe he could learn to love again, differently than before, but no less truly. The thought scared him almost as much as it comforted him. 2 days later, they made the trip into Redemption Falls. Cole drove the wagon with Eliza beside him and the children in the back, all of them dressed in their best clothes, which in the case of Henry and May meant clothes that were clean and only slightly worn. Eliza wore another of Sarah's dresses, this one a soft blue that made her eyes look darker, and Cole found himself stealing glances at her when he thought she wouldn't notice. The town was quiet when they arrived, most people sheltering from the midday heat. Cole helped Eliza down from the wagon, and together they walked toward the small church at the end of the street, Henry and May trailing behind them like a tiny procession. Reverend Miller was in his study when they knocked, and his eyebrows climbed toward his hairline when Cole explained why they'd come. Marriage. Cole, I haven't seen you darken a church door in 5 years, and now you want to get married? I do. Today, if possible. The Reverend studied them. Cole's set jaw, Eliza's nervous hands, the children watching everything with solemn eyes. Whatever he saw there seemed to satisfy some question he hadn't asked aloud. All right. Let me get my wife to serve as witness, and we'll take care of this. The ceremony was brief, almost perfunctory. They stood in the small sanctuary with dust motes dancing in the light from the high windows, and Cole felt Sarah's absence like a physical thing. He'd stood in a different church 9 years ago, pledging his life to her, never imagining he'd someday stand in another church making similar vows to a woman he barely knew. But when Reverend Miller asked if he took Eliza as his lawfully wedded wife, Cole's voice was steady. I do. And when Eliza repeated the same vows, her hand trembling in his, she sounded equally certain. They signed the papers, the Reverend's wife signed as witness, and just like that it was done. Cole Maddox had a wife again. Henry and May had a stepfather. The Warren family had legal protection that Thomas Warren would find difficult to challenge. Congratulations, Reverend Miller said, though his tone suggested he had questions he was too polite to ask. May God bless your union. They were walking back toward the wagon, the marriage certificate tucked safely in Cole's vest pocket, when a voice called out behind them. Well, well, heard some interesting news, Maddox. Cole turned to find the scarred man leaning against a post outside the saloon, a smirk on his face that made Cole's hands curl into fists. Beside him, he felt Eliza go rigid. That's Riker, she whispered, one of Thomas's men. Mrs. Warren, Riker said, tipping his hat mockingly. Or should I say Mrs. Maddox now? Got to admit, that's a clever move. Marry some rancher so your brother-in-law can't claim you. Thomas is going to love hearing about this. Then you better get writing to tell him, Cole said evenly. Conversation's over. Not quite. Riker pushed off from the post, moving closer. See, thing is, marriage doesn't erase debt. She still owes Thomas for all those months he took care of her and her brats. And now that she's got a husband with property, well, that just means Thomas knows where to collect. There is no debt. There never was. Cole's voice was quiet but hard as iron. And if Thomas Warren wants to discuss it further, he can take it up with a judge. Otherwise, he and you and anyone else he sends can stay the hell away from my family. Your family, Riker laughed. That's sweet, real sweet. We'll see how long that lasts when Thomas... He didn't get to finish the sentence. Henry, who'd been standing behind Cole, suddenly darted forward with a rock in his hand and threw it with all the force his 8-year-old arm could muster. The rock caught Riker square in the shin, and the man yelped in pain and surprise. You leave my mother alone, Henry shouted, his face flushed with anger. She doesn't owe Thomas anything. He's a liar and a cheat, and we're never going back. Cole grabbed Henry before the boy could throw another rock, pulling him back against his chest. Easy now, easy. Riker's face had gone dark with rage. You little... Touch him and I'll break your arm, Cole said flatly. Now get out of here before this escalates into something you'll regret. For a moment, Cole thought Riker might actually try something. The man's hand hovered near his pistol, his jaw working with barely suppressed violence. But Sheriff Crawford had emerged from his office down the street, drawn by the commotion, and the presence of the law seemed to tip the balance. "This isn't over," Riker spat, then turned and stalked away. Cole waited until the man disappeared around a corner before releasing the breath he'd been holding. He looked down at Henry, who was shaking in his arms. "That was very brave," Cole said quietly, "and very stupid. Don't ever do that again." "He was threatening Mama." "I know, but men like that, they're dangerous when provoked. You have to be smart about how you fight them." Cole turned Henry to face him, gripping his shoulders. "You protect your family by staying alive and unharmed. Understand? Not by throwing rocks at armed men." Henry nodded, his bravado crumbling into tears. Cole pulled him close, and over the boy's head he saw Eliza holding May, both of them pale and shaken. "Let's go home," he said. They drove back in tense silence. The joy of the wedding, such as it was, completely evaporated. Cole kept watch on the road behind them, half expecting Riker to follow, but they made it back to the ranch without incident. That night, after the children were finally asleep, Cole sat on the porch with his rifle and a growing sense that the worst was yet to come. Eliza joined him after an hour, wrapped in a shawl against the cooling air. "I'm sorry," she said without preamble. "This is my fault. If I'd just stayed with Thomas, if I'd worked off those fake debts, none of this—" "Stop," Cole's voice was firm. "You did nothing wrong. Thomas Warren is the one at fault here. Him and men like him who think they can exploit people weaker than themselves. But now you're in danger because of me. I made my choice with my eyes open, Eliza. I knew there might be consequences. I don't regret it." She was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Henry could have been hurt today because of his connection to me. Henry was defending his mother. That's not weakness, it's love. And it's my job now to teach him how to channel that love into something that won't get him killed." Cole looked over at her. "We're a family now, in the eyes of the law and in reality. That means we face threats together, not with you shouldering all the blame." "A family," Eliza repeated softly, as if testing the word. "That's going to take some getting used to. For all of us." They sat together in the darkness, newly married but still essentially strangers, bound together by necessity and growing affection and the looming threat of violence. It wasn't how either of them had imagined marriage, but it was what they had. And somehow, sitting there with Eliza beside him and his rifle across his knees, Cole felt more alive than he had in 5 years, even with danger approaching. Maybe especially because of it, because now he had something worth protecting again. And this time, he wouldn't fail. The storm arrived 3 days after the wedding, but it wasn't the kind that brought rain. The storm wore dust-covered boots and carried guns, and it announced itself with the thunder of hoofbeats just after dawn. Cole was in the barn when he heard them coming. He'd been up since before first light, unable to sleep, that familiar instinct for danger keeping him restless and alert. The moment the sound of horses reached his ears, he moved with swift purpose, grabbing his rifle from where it leaned against the stall and moving to the barn door. 6 riders approached in a tight formation, moving with the confidence of men who believed numbers made them invincible. Cole recognized Riker and Dawson in the front, but the other 4 were strangers. And in the center of the group, mounted on a fine bay horse that had no business being ridden hard across dusty Montana territory, was a man Cole instinctively knew was Thomas Warren. He was younger than Cole expected, maybe 35, with dark hair slicked back and a suit that probably cost more than most ranchers made in a year. His face had a soft quality that spoke of indoor work and regular meals, but his eyes were hard and calculating as they swept over the Broken Creek Ranch like he was already counting its value. Cole stepped out of the barn, rifle held loosely but ready, and watched them approach. Behind him, he heard the house door open and knew without looking that Eliza had seen them too. He prayed she'd have the sense to keep the children inside, to stay back where it was safer, but he knew her well enough by now to know she wouldn't hide while others fought her battles. The rider stopped 20 feet from where Cole stood, close enough to talk but far enough that any sudden move would be obvious. Thomas Warren dismounted with the practiced ease of someone who'd spent money on riding lessons, and he approached Cole with a smile that never reached his eyes. "Mr. Maddox, I presume. I'm Thomas Warren. I believe you have something that belongs to me." "I have a wife and 2 stepchildren who belong to themselves and no one else," Cole replied evenly, "if that's what you're referring to." Thomas's smile widened slightly, though his eyes remained cold. "Ah, yes, the marriage. Quite the clever maneuver, though ultimately pointless. You see, there are debts that existed before your marriage, debts that don't simply disappear because my sister-in-law decided to run off and find herself a protector. Show me the documentation. Legal proof of these debts, signed and witnessed properly. I have all the documentation necessary. Then show it to a judge, file a claim through proper legal channels. That's how civilized people handle disputes." Cole's voice remained calm, but his grip on the rifle tightened slightly. "What civilized people don't do is chase widows and children across the territory and show up at someone's ranch with armed men." Thomas's pleasant expression flickered with irritation. "Mr. Maddox, I'm trying to resolve this reasonably, but you're making that difficult. No, you're trying to intimidate me into handing over my family. There's a difference." "Your family?" Thomas laughed, the sound harsh and mocking. "You've known her for what, 2 weeks? And you're willing to stake your life and property on a woman who's clearly using you? Careful how you talk about my wife." The temperature of the conversation dropped several degrees. Riker's hand drifted toward his pistol, and Cole saw 2 of the other men shift in their saddles, preparing for violence. "Thomas!" Eliza's voice cut through the tension like a blade. She'd stepped out onto the porch, and Cole's heart sank even as pride swelled in his chest. She stood straight and defiant despite the fear he could see in the set of her shoulders. "This is between you and me. Leave Cole out of it." "Dear Eliza," Thomas turned toward her with that same cold smile. "Always so dramatic. I'm not here to hurt anyone. I'm simply here to collect what's owed and bring my family home where they belong." "We're not your family. We never were. You manufactured those debts to trap us, to exploit us. I won't let you do that anymore." "Is that so?" Thomas took a step toward the porch, and Cole moved to intercept him, putting himself directly in the man's path. "That's close enough." Thomas stopped, and for the first time, genuine anger flashed across his face. "You're making a serious mistake, Maddox. Do you have any idea who I am? The connections I have? I could make your life very difficult." "You could try," Cole agreed. "But before you do, you might want to look around." He'd noticed them a few minutes ago, Jim Blackwell emerging from the tree line to the west with his rifle, Tom Patterson and his 2 sons positioned near the cattle pasture to the south, and 3 other ranchers Cole had sent word to earlier in the week, taking up positions that gave them clear lines of sight on Thomas's men. They'd been watching, waiting, and now they made themselves visible. Thomas's expression shifted from confidence to concern as he realized they were surrounded. His hired men looked to him for guidance, hands hovering near weapons but unsure whether drawing them would be suicide. "You see, Thomas," Cole said quietly, "you made a miscalculation. You thought you were coming to intimidate one lone rancher, but out here we look after our own, and Eliza and her children, they're one of us now. This is illegal. What's illegal is threatening people on their own property. What's illegal is pursuing false debt claims across territorial lines. What's illegal is showing up with armed men to intimidate a family." Cole's voice grew harder. "You want to make this a legal matter? Fine. We'll ride into town right now and present our cases to Sheriff Crawford. You show your documentation, Eliza will show hers, and we'll let the law decide." "How does that sound?" Thomas's jaw worked furiously. He was clearly a man unused to being outmaneuvered, and the realization that he'd walked into a trap of his own making was written across his face. "Or," Cole continued, "you can accept that Eliza is legally married to me now, that any debts that may or may not have existed are dissolved by that marriage, and you can ride away with your dignity intact. Your choice." The silence stretched out, broken only by the nervous shifting of horses and the distant call of a crow. Cole could see Thomas calculating odds, weighing his options, trying to find a way to salvage his pride without getting himself or his men shot. Finally, Riker spoke up. Boss, this ain't worth it. We're outgunned and outpositioned. Time to cut our losses. Shut up, Thomas snapped, but the fire had gone out of his voice. He looked at Eliza with something that might have been genuine anger or might have been wounded pride. You've made your choice then. You'd rather throw your lot in with a stranger than honor your family obligations. You were never family, Thomas. You were a jailer. Eliza's voice was steady now, strengthened by Cole's presence and the support of the armed ranchers surrounding them. My obligation is to my children and their future, not to working myself to death to pay off debts you invented. Those debts were real. Then prove it in court, Cole interrupted. Otherwise, this conversation is over. Thomas stared at him for a long moment, and Cole stared back without blinking. This was the moment that would determine everything, whether Thomas would accept defeat or escalate into violence that would end badly for everyone. Fine, Thomas said finally, the word coming out like poison. Keep her. Keep the brats. But don't think this is over, Maddox. I have lawyers, connections, resources you can't even imagine. I'll make you regret— No, you won't. Jim Blackwell's voice carried across the yard as the old rancher stepped closer, his rifle still held ready. Because if you try anything, legal harassment, hired thugs, mysterious accidents, every rancher in this valley will know exactly who to blame. And we take care of our own out here. You understand what I'm saying? It was a threat, clear and unambiguous, and Thomas understood it perfectly. He was a man who understood power dynamics, and right now the power was entirely against him. This is ridiculous, he muttered, but he was already moving toward his horse. Absolute insanity. He mounted with less grace than he dismounted, his face flushed with humiliation. Riker and the other men followed suit, and within moments they were turning their horses back toward the road. Thomas, Eliza called out, and he reined in, looking back at her with barely concealed fury. Don't ever come back here. Don't send anyone else. Don't write letters or make threats or try to contact us in any way. We're done. Forever. For a moment, Cole thought Thomas might say something cutting, something meant to hurt her one last time. But instead, he just yanked his horse's head around and kicked it into a gallop, dust rising behind him as he and his men retreated. Cole didn't lower his rifle until they were completely out of sight, and even then he kept it close. Jim and the other ranchers slowly emerged from their positions, gathering in front of the house with expressions ranging from relieved to grimly satisfied. Well, Jim said, slapping Cole on the shoulder, that was more excitement than I've had in months. Appreciate you coming, Jim. All of you. Cole looked around at the men who'd answered his call, who'd stood with him against a threat they had no obligation to face. I won't forget this. Nothing to forget, Tom Patterson said gruffly. Like Jim said, we take care of our own. Mrs. Maddox is part of this community now, and that means something. Eliza had come down from the porch, and she was looking at all of them with tears streaming down her face. Thank you. All of you. I don't know how to repay— Don't need repaying, Jim interrupted gently. Just promise you'll pass it forward someday when someone else needs help. That's how things work out here. The ranchers stayed long enough to make sure Thomas and his men were truly gone, then gradually dispersed back to their own properties and responsibilities. Jim lingered longest, pulling Cole aside before he left. That went about as well as it could have, the old rancher said quietly. But you need to stay alert for a while. Men like Thomas Warren, they sometimes come back around when you least expect it. I know. I'll be careful. And Cole? Jim's weathered face softened slightly. I'm glad to see you living again, building something instead of just existing. Sarah would have approved. The words hit Cole harder than he expected, and he had to clear his throat before responding. Thanks, Jim. After everyone left, Cole found Eliza sitting on the porch steps with Henry and May pressed against her sides. All three of them looked exhausted, wrung out from the tension and fear. He sat down beside them, and May immediately crawled into his lap, seeking comfort. Is the bad man really gone? She asked, her voice small. He's really gone, sweetheart. Forever? Forever, Cole confirmed, though he knew Jim was right about staying alert. But May didn't need to carry that worry. You're safe now, all of you. Henry looked up at him with those serious eyes. You could have been killed. All of you could have been killed, standing up for us. But we weren't. That's what matters. Why did they come? Those other men, the ranchers, they don't even know us. Cole thought about how to explain the complex web of rural community bonds to an 8-year-old. Out here, Henry, we depend on each other. Your neighbors might be miles away, but when trouble comes, they're the only help you've got. So we look after each other. Someday, when one of them needs help, we'll be there for them too. Like family, Henry said slowly. Exactly like family, just a bigger one. They sat together as the sun climbed higher, the danger finally passed, the threat that had chased them for months finally neutralized. Cole felt Eliza's hand find his, and he squeezed it gently, acknowledging everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived together. The days that followed settled into a new rhythm, one that felt more permanent than the cautious uncertainty of before. With Thomas Warren's threat removed, Eliza and the children could truly begin to make the Broken Creek their home. May's laughter rang through the house with increasing frequency. Henry threw himself into learning everything Cole could teach him about ranching, and Eliza moved through each day with a lightness that transformed her entire bearing. Cole found himself drawn into their orbit in ways he hadn't anticipated. Teaching Henry to properly mend a fence line, listening to May's elaborate stories about the chickens' secret lives, watching Eliza hang laundry while humming to herself, these small domestic moments filled spaces in his heart he'd thought permanently closed. About 2 weeks after the confrontation, late summer brought the promised thunderstorms Jim had predicted. They rolled in one evening like drumbeats, massive clouds piling up against the mountains to the west, lightning flickering in their depths. Cole was checking the barn, making sure all the animals were secure, when the first drops began to fall. Within minutes, it became a deluge, rain pounding against the roof with enough force to drown out all other sound. He finished his work quickly and ran for the house, arriving soaked and breathless. Eliza met him at the door with a towel, laughing at his bedraggled appearance. "You look like you swam here." "Feels like I did." He dried his face and hair, then noticed the children weren't in sight. "Where are Henry and May?" "Asleep already. May was exhausted from playing outside all day, and Henry's been up since before dawn helping with the cattle." She took the wet towel from him. "There's hot coffee on the stove if you want some." They moved to the kitchen, and Cole poured himself a cup, listening to the rain hammer against the windows. It was the kind of storm that made you grateful for solid walls and a good roof, that reminded you how vulnerable humans really were against the raw power of nature. "Can I ask you something?" Eliza said, leaning against the counter. "Of course." "Are you happy?" The question came out tentative, uncertain. "With how things turned out, with us being here?" Cole considered the question seriously, wanting to give her an honest answer. "I don't know if happy is quite the right word. It's more like I feel like I'm living again instead of just going through motions. Does that make sense?" "It does. I feel the same way." She wrapped her hands around her own coffee cup. "When we first came here, I was so desperate I would have agreed to anything. But now, getting to know you, seeing how you are with the children, how you've stood up for us, Cole, I'm not here out of desperation anymore. I'm here because I want to be." The admission hung in the air between them, weighted with meaning. Cole set down his coffee cup and moved closer to her, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. "Eliza, I need to tell you something." "All right." "That first night, when I found you and the children behind that building, I told myself I was helping because it was the right thing to do. And that was true as far as it went. But somewhere along the way, it became more than that." He took a breath, committing to honesty even though it scared him. "I care about you, not just as someone I'm protecting or as my wife on paper, but as a person. I care about your thoughts and your fears and your hopes. I care about making you smile. And I don't know what that means or where it leads, but I needed you to know." Eliza's eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I care about you too, so much it terrifies me sometimes. I keep waiting for the other shoe to drop, for you to realize you've made a mistake, for this all to fall apart the way everything else in my life has. But it doesn't. You're still here, still steady, still kind." "I'm not going anywhere," Cole said softly. "Whatever this is between us, however it develops or doesn't, I'm committed to you and Henry and May. That's not going to change. Can I—" Eliza hesitated, then reached out and took his hand. "Can I tell you something that might sound crazy? After everything we've been through, I doubt anything would sound crazy. I think I'm falling in love with you." The words came out in a rush, like she was afraid if she didn't say them quickly, she'd lose her nerve. I know it's too soon. I know we barely know each other. I know this was supposed to just be a practical arrangement, but I can't help how I feel. And if that makes you uncomfortable, if you need me to take it back, Cole stopped her with a gentle finger against her lips. Don't take it back, because I think I'm falling in love with you too. The confession felt like stepping off a cliff, exhilarating and terrifying at once. But Eliza's face transformed with joy so pure it took his breath away, and suddenly she was in his arms and he was holding her close, feeling her heart race against his chest. Outside, thunder rolled across the prairie, and lightning split the sky, nature's fury painting the world in stark flashes of white. But inside, wrapped in each other's arms, Cole and Eliza found a peace that had nothing to do with the absence of danger and everything to do with the presence of hope. I never thought I'd feel this way again, Cole murmured into her hair. After Sarah, I thought that part of me was dead. Maybe it was, Eliza said softly, and maybe that's okay. This isn't the same as what you had before. It's different, but it can still be real, still be good. It is good. You're good. He pulled back slightly so he could see her face. Eliza, I know we got married for practical reasons, but could we make it a real marriage? She smiled, understanding what he was trying to ask. Yes, I'd like that very much. He kissed her then, gentle and tentative at first, then with growing confidence as she kissed him back. It felt like a promise and a beginning, like everything that had come before had been leading to this moment of choosing each other, not out of necessity, but out of genuine feeling. When they finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Eliza laughed softly. Henry's going to be insufferable about this. He'll claim he knew all along that we'd fall in love for real. He probably did know. Kid's too smart for his own good sometimes. They stayed in the kitchen talking for hours, sharing stories about their pasts, their dreams for the future, all the small details that turned strangers into partners. The storm raged outside, but they barely noticed, too wrapped up in each other and the tentative joy of new love to care about thunder and lightning. The summer wore on, and with each passing day, the Broken Creek Ranch felt less like Cole's property and more like their home. Henry grew taller and more confident, his nightmares about the bad men fading as security and routine replaced fear and chaos. May bloomed under the attention and safety, her natural curiosity and joy returning in full force. And Eliza transformed from the haunted, desperate woman Cole had first found into someone who smiled freely and dreamed boldly. Cole taught Henry to ride properly, how to read cattle, how to fix almost anything with wire and determination. He showed May which plants were safe to pick and which to avoid, how to collect eggs without upsetting the hens, where the best hiding spots were for when you needed a moment alone. And with Eliza, he learned to open his heart again, to trust that love didn't have to end in loss, that building something new didn't dishonor what came before. Jim Blackwell visited frequently, always with some excuse about needing to borrow a tool or check on a fence line, but really just wanting to see the transformation in his old friend. One afternoon, watching Henry work alongside Cole to fix a water trough, while May chased butterflies and Eliza tended her garden, Jim pulled Cole aside. "You did good, son. Real good. That boy's going to grow up strong and capable. The girl's going to remember what it feels like to be safe and loved. And that woman, well, I haven't seen you look at anyone like that since Sarah." "It's different than it was with Sarah," Cole said honestly. "But it's real." "Different doesn't mean lesser. Just means you're building something new instead of trying to recreate what was." Jim clapped him on the shoulder. "I'm proud of you, Cole, for choosing to live again. It would have been easier to stay locked in that grief. Maybe, but easier isn't always better." By the time autumn began to paint the cottonwoods gold and send cool winds across the prairie, the Maddox family, as they were now known throughout the valley, had settled into a comfortable routine. Cole and Eliza shared a bedroom, their marriage real in every sense now, built on growing affection and genuine partnership. Henry had started helping with serious ranch work, earning his keep and learning skills that would serve him for life. May had adopted every stray animal within a 5-mile radius and somehow convinced Cole to let her keep most of them. One evening in late September, they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and purple. May was asleep on this porch swing, curled up like a cat, while Henry sat on the steps whittling a piece of wood with a knife Cole had given him for his 9th birthday. "You know what I realized today?" Eliza said, her head resting on Cole's shoulder. "What's that?" "I'm happy, completely, genuinely happy. Not just content or grateful or relieved, but actually happy." She lifted her head to look at him. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this way again after losing James. But here we are." "Here we are," Cole agreed, pulling her closer. "Do you think Thomas will really leave us alone? Forever?" It was a fear that surfaced occasionally, usually when things were going well, and Eliza's mind started looking for threats. Cole understood it. When you'd been hurt as badly as she had, it was hard to trust good fortune. "I think he will. The legal marriage gives us protection, and the fact that we have community support means he'd be taking on more than just me if he tried anything. Men like Thomas, they're bullies. They pick on the weak and isolated. We're neither of those things anymore. Because of you. Because of all of us." Henry standing up to Riker, you refusing to back down, the ranchers coming when we needed them, even May in her own way. We're stronger together than any of us could be alone. Henry looked up from his whittling. "Are we really safe now? You promise?" "I promise," Cole said, "and you know I don't make promises I can't keep." The boy nodded, satisfied, and went back to his work. Cole watched him in the fading light and felt a fierce surge of protectiveness mixed with pride. This child who wasn't his by blood, but was absolutely his by choice, who'd been forced to grow up too fast but was slowly learning to be a kid again, Henry represented everything good about their cobbled-together family. "I love you," Eliza said suddenly, simply, like she'd just discovered the truth of it. "I love you too." They sat together as true darkness fell, and the first stars began to appear, listening to the familiar sounds of the ranch settling for the night. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed to each other. Closer by, the horses whickered softly in the barn, and from inside the house came the sound of one of the barn cats May had promoted to house cat knocking something over, a reminder that life was messy and unpredictable and beautiful. "You know what the best part is?" Eliza mused. "Not the safety or the security or even the love, though all of that is wonderful. The best part is having a future to look forward to. For so long, I could only think about surviving the next day, the next hour. But now I can think about next spring's garden, about teaching May to read, about watching Henry grow into a man. I can think about growing old with you, about grandchildren someday, about a life that stretches out ahead instead of just trying to outrun the past." "Then that's what we'll do," Cole said simply. "We'll build that future day by day together." And they did. Through the winter that followed, as snow blanketed the prairie and they huddled close around the fire, they built routines and traditions that would define their family. Through the next spring, when new calves were born and May planted her first garden with Eliza's guidance, they built memories. Through the summer after that, when Henry learned to break a horse and Cole taught him to read the weather like a book, they built confidence. Years passed. Henry grew into a young man who could run the ranch as capably as Cole, who went to town and made the girls blush but always came home because home mattered more than adventure. May grew into a spirited girl who collected more than just animals. She collected stories and knowledge and the kind of fierce independence that came from being raised by people who'd fought for their freedom. And Cole and Eliza grew into each other, their love deepening with each shared season, each challenge overcome, each quiet evening spent on the porch, watching their children thrive in the home they'd built together. One evening, nearly 5 years after that first day, when Cole had found a desperate woman and her children hiding behind a building, he and Eliza stood on that same porch watching a spectacular sunset. Henry was in town courting the blacksmith's daughter, and May was at a friend's house for a sleepover, leaving them alone for the first time in what felt like forever. "Do you ever think about how different things would be if you just walked past that alley?" Eliza asked. "Sometimes, usually when I'm counting my blessings. We were so broken when you found us, desperate and scared and barely holding on. You were surviving against impossible odds. That's not broken, that's strong. Maybe, but you put us back together in ways we couldn't have done ourselves." She turned to face him, and in the golden light her face was luminous. "You gave us more than safety, Cole. You gave us a life worth living. You gave me the same thing. This house was dead before you came. I was dead, just going through motions. You brought it all back to life, laughter and purpose and love. Everything I thought I'd lost forever. So we saved each other. Yeah, I guess we did. They stood together watching the sun sink below the horizon, painting the clouds in shades of fire and gold. In the distance, they could see cattle moving across the pasture, heading toward shelter for the night. Closer by, the garden Eliza and May had planted together grew in neat rows, testament to patience and care. And all around them, the land stretched out in every direction, beautiful and harsh and honest. This was home. Not the buildings or the property lines or even the specific piece of ground they stood on, but the feeling of belonging that came from choosing each other every day. From showing up, standing firm, building something real out of necessity and circumstance, and ultimately, love. Hey, Eliza? Yes? Remember when you said you'd stay one night and then leave? She laughed, the sound rich and free. I do. I was such a fool to think I could walk away from this. Not a fool, just scared. Well, I'm not scared anymore. This is where I belong, where we all belong. Good. Because I'm not planning on letting you leave, ever. Promise? Promise. The last light faded from the sky, and stars began to emerge one by one, the same stars that had watched over their first tentative nights together, that had witnessed their struggle and their triumph and everything in between. Cole thought about that desperate woman behind the building, about the choice he'd made to help her, about how that single decision had transformed both their lives in ways he never could have predicted. Some people would call it fate or destiny or divine providence. Cole just called it lucky. Lucky that he'd been in town that day. Lucky that Eliza had chosen to trust him. Lucky that they'd both been brave enough to build something new out of their broken pieces. Come on, he said, taking her hand. Let's go inside. In a minute. I want to stand here a little longer, just looking at everything we've built. So they stood together in the gathering darkness, Cole and Eliza Maddox, watching over the home they'd fought for and the life they'd created together. And in the quiet of that moment, with stars overhead and solid ground beneath their feet, they understood that sometimes the best things in life come not from careful planning or perfect circumstances, but from being brave enough to say yes when a stranger offers help, brave enough to stand against threats, brave enough to love again after loss. The future stretched out before them, full of possibility and promise. There would be challenges ahead, certainly. There always were. But they would face them together, as they had faced everything else, with courage and love, and the unshakable certainty that they were stronger united than they ever could have been apart. And that, Cole thought, as Eliza squeezed his hand and led him toward the warm, welcoming lights of their home, was more than enough. It was everything.